My name is Cory Paul. I'm the Executive Director of the Greater Columbus Chapter of the American Red Cross. So I am actually on family leave right now. I was supposed to do a presentation for you all back in September, October, and I was actually deployed to Wisconsin for the Afghanistan repatriation and resettlement mission. So after the fall of Kabul, we had a lot of people that were displaced, and the Red Cross was involved from the beginning to ensure that those who arrived at the military bases across the country with quite literally the clothes on their back, not really knowing maybe where some of their family members are, what their plans are, escaping a place of violence, and then show up in Wisconsin and not really know what's going on or what to do next. And so it was my joy and absolute pleasure to be one of about 200 volunteers at that time, where we did everything from purchase diapers and baby formula and cribs for kids, to clothing, to shoes, to prayer rugs, everything that you could think of that you would need in the immediacy. The Red Cross was available to provide, and work with plenty of partners, a bunch of partners, but that's what we were doing, that's what I was doing in September or October. And again, it's my absolute joy to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about everything that the Red Cross does. The Red Cross has 5 lines of service. I'm also going to have some time for questions, so if you have that burning question that you have, let me know, and I'm happy to answer it for you. You may see on the first slide here, blood supplies at a 10-year low, 10-plus year. I'll tell you, it's probably forever. This is the biggest situation that we've ever been in. Not just 10 years, it's 100 years. This is the crisis of the century within the blood situation. So I'll talk about that. And happy birthday to Clara. She just celebrated her 200th birthday in December. So happy birthday to Clara Barton. So in my work, I get to work in all kinds of disaster relief. I've been to hurricanes, I've been to wildfires. This is my newest disaster. This is Hurricane Jackson. He joined us on the 12th. And so again, I'm on family leave, but I wouldn't take up this time to speak with you all. So yeah, that's Hurricane Jackson. He's sleeping, eating just fine. Mom's doing good. We're very excited. I'm very excited to get back to him. And one really great thing is that the Red Cross, this family leave policy just actually enacted in October. And so I was able to take one of the first ones to take it. So down to the business. The Red Cross prevents and alleviates human suffering in the face of emergencies with the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. I say that about 1,000 times a day, but it doesn't lose its impact. The power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. If I could ask anybody who's a blood donor, raise your hand. Keep them up. Anybody who's a volunteer keep those hands up. Anybody who's a volunteer for Red Cross or for any other organization, raise your hand. Right? And you all are Rotarians, so you all donate to different causes, right? So I'm talking to a lot of the stakeholders, the shareholders in the room. This mission means a lot to us. This mission is what drives our volunteers. This mission is what keeps the Red Cross moving on a daily basis. And we have our challenges throughout COVID, throughout the blood emergency, throughout large, unprecedented disasters that happen almost on a daily basis. We are encouraging our volunteers and working with our staff and our donors to up their game and to see what needs to happen within the humanitarian realm. Oh, you got me? Sorry. That's okay. Sorry. There we go. So I talked about our 5 lines of service, and I'll just briefly go over each one of these. So training services, CPR, first aid, babysitting classes, aquatics classes, lifeguarding classes. We have trainings all over the footprint here in Ohio throughout. CPR first aid. If you're not trained in CPR first aid, I would suggest you doing so. Every 2 years is usually the standard. Sometimes the techniques and the science changes a little bit behind it, and so there's always it's always really good to get that training in. If something were to happen right now, if there was a cardiac emergency, it would take emergency services about 4 to 8 minutes to get here. That's a long time. That's a long time for oxygen not to be flowing to your brain. We are the first part of that emergency service, right? We identify there's a need, we can do immediate care and call 911 to get the professionals in here. But we're not all gonna just be standing around, right? If something were to happen, jump into action, and the training is what saves that life, right? Knowing what to do in that emergency, not panicking, being part of that system is all our responsibility. So I would encourage you all, take a class through the Red Cross. Biomedical services, blood drives, I saw a lot of donors. I also see some hosts of blood drives in this room, people that use their organizations to host monthly blood drives. That is a extremely important thing to do. It is part of national security. It is part of our healthcare system. We are, like I said, in a 10-year low. It's more like a 100-year low. It's nothing like I've ever seen. It's nothing like most of our Red Crossers have ever seen. And this has a lot to do with coronavirus. It has a lot to do with the winter storms. It has a lot to do with staffing and availability. It has a lot to do with folks' involvement in the blood supply, right? If you're looking for that next job, or if you're taking care of family at home, you're not going to go out to that blood drive. If you're staying at home working remotely, and that's your normal every day right now, and you used to give blood every month at work, you're not doing that anymore. And so we're asking you to find those community drives, find those drives around your homes, use the blood drive app to make an appointment, keep your appointment, and if you can't make that appointment, cancel that appointment. There are some more kind of science involved in a lot of that. I'm sure you all have questions on blood drives, so we're gonna revisit that. Disaster cycle services. So it's a cycle: preparedness, response, and recovery. You can't have one without the other, right? So I'll talk a little bit about preparedness. We talk about installing free smoke alarms. We can do that with the Red Cross and partner organizations. We'll be hitting that in May, where we install free smoke alarms in anyone's home. I'm going to encourage you today to go home and check your own smoke alarms. Before Jackson was born, I went around and replaced all our smoke alarms. We respond to single-family house fires every day. That is the number one commonly occurring disaster in the world. You see the big hurricanes, you see the big tornadoes, you see the big wildfires. Of course, they're getting a lot of media, but you may not have seen the multitude of apartment fires that have hit or have occurred within this area in the last couple months. And that is not a unique situation in Columbus. That's throughout the country. And so people being hurt in house fires and people being killed in house fires is something that we can't stand for. And so installing free smoke alarms and preparing your family, talking to your family about what to do in case that smoke alarm goes off, not to hide in your closet or hide in your bed, who gets the dog, what door do we go out of, where do we meet, all of those things can be discussed and kind of war gamed almost. So it's something that you should consider as you're talking to your family. You saw all kinds of stuff that was happening with the winter weather, where there were cars that were on the freeway for 48 hours, 24 hours. Do you have a blanket? Do you have road flares? Do you have a first aid kit? Do you have batteries? Do you have a radio? Do you have other things in your car? Do you have food and water in your car that would prepare you for an emergency like that? So there's all kinds of things to think about in the preparedness place. It's not my job to scare you. It's my job to make sure that you're aware of the threats that can and will happen in this area. Okay, so that's preparedness. Response, we have a disaster action team. We have volunteers that respond every day, 365 days a year, 3 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, on Christmas morning, New Year's Eve, whenever it is, we have volunteers who are on call to respond to any one of those emergencies. Again, mainly single-family house fires, but we also see flooding. We also see straight-line winds. We also see tornadoes, winter weather. Sometimes it gets so bad where we're working with other organizations to find shelter for people. And then the recovery piece. So with recovery comes casework. It's kind of more of an individualized situation. You had this disaster, and now what are we going to do to get you back to normal? How are we going to get you back into that house? How are we going to get you into a new house? How are we going to get you back to work? How are we going to get your kids back to school? All those questions and more, we work with that individual or those clients to work on the recovery plan. Again, that can be a single-family house fire, or it can be a very, very large multi-state disaster. It doesn't change the need. Service to the armed forces. Let me see a raise of hands who are vets, service members, family members, caregivers. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for your service. If you know of the Red Cross because of the service to the armed forces, it's probably not a great thing. It's probably because you had an emergency communication while you were overseas or while you were on duty where the Red Cross notified your command of something that was happening at home, whether it's a birth, a death, some sort of emergency situation that requires your attention. We do that about 400,000 times a year nationwide, all by volunteers. And what happens is if, let's say I'm still in the military, I deployed to Afghanistan, my mom's real sick, my dad calls the Red Cross, hey, we need to get Cory home to take care of the family. The Red Cross will then verify that that's the situation, and then call the command, work with the command to get me home, get me on a helicopter, get me on a plane, get me back home to see my family. 400,000 times a year. We're the trusted agency of the DoD to do that. We also do resiliency training and workshops, mind-body workshops. I'll tell you, when I came home from Afghanistan, my head was messed up for a while. I didn't know, this wasn't normal to me. Sitting down in a room wasn't normal to me, and so it was really hard to get over. But with the Red Cross, there were some mind-body classes and some really kind of talking about your feelings. How do I talk to my kid about why I'm grumpy? Or how do I talk to my wife about why that loud noise freaked me out? Or how do I talk to my wife about not wanting to go to that concert because there are going to be thousands of people there? All those things, I worked actually through the Red Cross, through the actual training that we provide to kind of work through some of that. It's a great stuff. And then our international services. So international services, international humanitarian law. One thing that we work on is the importance of protecting hospitals, protecting caregivers, protecting nurses, protecting cultural and important areas throughout the countries, et cetera. We also do a measles and rubella campaign, much like the polio campaign from the Rotary. So we will work with many other organizations to purchase and provide measles vaccines throughout. And so those are our lines of service. A lot, that's the second slide, third slide. There's a lot of things that the Red Cross does, probably some of those things you never even thought of, but those are the things that we work with, all by volunteers and all by donors. So this is what we've done in 2021. So a little over 3,000 blood drives, about 84,000 blood donations. Usually you multiply that by 2 or 3, and that's the amount of lives saved through each one of those donations. We go from about 700 to about 1,000 volunteers. We wax and wane. We tend to see more volunteers after larger disasters. They see something on the news, they sign up, they get the training, they go deploy, they stay with us for a while, and then they wait for the next one. So it does kind of fluctuate a little bit there. 308 local disasters last year. That's everything from a single-family house fire to a multifamily, larger apartments where we have to open a shelter or work in a larger scope. Assisting 413 families. We installed over 1,000 smoke alarms last year, and that's still in the eyes of COVID too. So folks aren't really interested in letting us in their house that often, right? So we're installing the smoke alarms. So we're knocking on doors, we're taking our volunteers with a ladder, a drill, the smoke alarms, going in the house and so that's a good place for it, and installing it, testing it, and making sure it works before we leave the door, before we walk out. We still are doing that. We're working with Columbus Fire. We're working with other fire departments to do that. Other partner agencies. In May, we'll be installing, doing kind of a blitz in neighborhoods. Fire escape plans is part of that piece. 14,000 individuals in CPR, AED, first aid. That's a really important thing. That makes me feel good knowing that there are other people trained in the community. About 4,000 in aquatics and water safety classes. Youth preparedness training, so we teach youth in the preparedness piece, listening to the smoke alarm, getting a kit, making a plan, being informed about what you should do in a disaster, being calm during a disaster. There's a whole module about kind of calming afterwards. And so we reached 237 youth. We blew that number out of the water this year. 667 service to armed forces cases. So those were the local soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Coast Guard, of local families that were in need. And so out of that 400,000 times a year, that was our little piece of that pie. And we usually provide 2 or 3 services for each of the case. And then we had about 128 other caregiving classes like babysitting, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to tell you a couple of ways that you can get involved with the Red Cross, and then I'll open it up for questions. Sound good? So one of the things that you can do that doesn't really take any training, very little kind of administrative stuff for the volunteerism, is being a blood donor ambassador. And what that is that's that smiling face, well, that masked smiling, you smile with your eyes, that face at the blood drive, the first person you see that will welcome you and thank you to be there. Do you have your rapid pass? What's your name? Let's get you signed in. Thanks for being here. There's the other person kind of works in the canteen and makes sure everybody's feeling good. Everybody's looking good after they gave blood. Here's your juice, here's your cookies. Let's make sure everybody's good. It's kind of host of that blood drive. Usually a 4 or 5 hour shift. Find a blood drive, you sign up, you show up, they give you a quick introduction, they thank you, and then that's what you do. So we're always looking for volunteers to do that. You can sign up online, redcross.org/volunteer. But it's a lot of fun. You see a lot of people, blood donors are wonderful people. They give of themselves. Most are usually in a pretty good mood. And so, it's nice to be able to welcome them and be part of that life-saving piece. Here's that free emergency preparedness training. So if you have those third, fourth, and fifth graders, or if you have those K through second graders, our disaster and emergency preparedness for youth are programs that we provide. Really, again, very simple preparedness tenets to make sure that we're starting our kids at an early age thinking about how to prepare themselves. And what's great about those third, fourth, and fifth graders is they're the ones that are going to go home and bug their parents to check their smoke alarms. They're the ones that are going to go bug their parents to get a kit together. I'll give you a quick story. I was in Dayton for a while, and I was the executive director during the Memorial Day tornadoes, where we got hit by 15 to 18 tornadoes. I still don't think they figured out how many tornadoes we got hit with. But I was in a shelter that night, and I spoke to a woman who had just arrived with a couple of her kids, and she said that the Red Cross saved her life. Well, yeah, welcome, enjoy the shelter, glad you're here, or not glad you're here, but we're here for you. And I really didn't put 2 and 2 together. And then she goes, well, I want to tell you, the Red Cross saved her life. Her kid did a pillowcase project at school and knew that due to tornadoes, if they didn't have a basement, they could go into that innermost room, which was their bathroom, and pull a mattress over themselves in the tub. They were hit directly with one of the tornadoes, and were sheltered at our only a couple scratches, and they did that because the kids were like, "Let's get in the tub, let's go." So that kid saved that family's life. And so, with that little bit of education, You may not think you're making a big difference, but you're making a huge one. So if you work with kids, if you have those agencies or organizations, if you have an in with a school, let me know and we'll get you that training. Again, with wonderful volunteers that do wonderful work. And then there's disaster preparedness for adults. I could come in here and give you a really good, solid preparedness training. We could talk about Columbus itself and this area. We could talk about the threats that we see. And that's totally different than living in Florida, right? And so it really is focused on you, the organization, and how you can best be prepared. Think about your own businesses. Do you have a continuity of operations plan, right? A lot of people in the pandemic before the pandemic, during the pandemic, are thinking about what their continuity of operations plan is. If your folks are all mucking out their basements after a large flood and aren't available to come in, what can you do? Your resources are your people, right? And so if they're hit with a disaster, if they're less prepared, then they're probably not coming back to work, right? Or it's going to take them a couple more days to get back to work. And so being more prepared, being resilient as an organization and as individuals within your organization is the best way to make sure that you can continue the business, right? So we can do a lot of that training. Hands-only CPR, that's the free CPR class. That is just compression only. We can teach that class for free. It's a great, you can get staff involved in those kind of things there. And then the ready rating, we'll look at your continuity of operations plan, we'll look at your preparedness, we'll look at your strategies, and then we'll kind of give you a ready rating. And we'll say, well, here's 2 more things that you could do to be a little bit more ready, right? Here's 1 or 2 more things that you could do for that next disaster. And so that's, all of that is free of charge to organizations, to individuals. Sound the alarm, save a life. I talk about smoke alarms a lot because they make a big deal. 7 lives are claimed by house fires every day. And so we know that smoke alarms and escaping your home within 2 minutes, scientifically proven to save your life, right? To decrease injuries throughout. And so we're offering free home safety information and smoke alarm installations. I put the number here. You can give us a call at any time. It's a voicemail number. You leave your name, your address, your phone number. We'll call you back. We'll make an appointment. We'll send volunteers to come out to your home. We'll remove the old smoke alarms. We'll install the new ones, brand new. We'll talk to you and your family about what your plan is. And usually it takes about 20 minutes. And now you feel better. You have free smoke alarms. It is for anybody. There's no eligibility, literally anybody. We want to focus on those who are more vulnerable, older folks, families with kids. But that is definitely something that I would encourage you all to do. And I gave you a couple things to do. So you can learn more at soundthealarm.org. Check your smoke alarms and encourage your neighbors to call. That's one thing. When I install my smoke alarms, I have an elderly neighbor next to me, and I check on her a fair amount and make sure that she had the working smoke alarms. One other thing I want to bring up to you is our health and equity project. So we take a lot of what the Red Cross does with the blood drives and CPR and preparedness training. We put it all into one day in one place. And we get a lot of other folks to join us, like COSI, Jack and Jill America, Mount Carmel, John Family Services. I'm going to send this out to Scott to get it all, bigger, more information. But in these areas, April 9th, June 11th, August 13th, in Franklinton, the Far East Side, Near East Side, we're still figuring out exact areas, but we're offering those trainings. We're offering testing for different specific types of blood, volunteer recruiting, community engagement, all kinds of great stuff in there. That's a good place to learn CPR or hands-only CPR. That's a good place to get signed up for smoke alarms, etc. Our goal is to work in neighborhoods that have a harder time, that we have a harder time getting into, or that are more vulnerable, or that are seeing more fires, that may have access and mobility issues, that may have language barriers. All of those things increase the vulnerability. And so there's a bunch of different ways, again, to be involved. You can volunteer, donate blood, and thank you for your donations. Donate money. We can support all our life-saving services through what we do. Take an online course. And there are free online courses. There are paid online courses. Check out redcross.org for more of those. We have safety tips on everything from the COVID environment to driving. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things, driving in winter storms, or what to do when your furnace goes out, or all of the tips, every tip that you can think of. And we can help you prepare for common emergencies. And so that is a lot of what the Red Cross does. I have a couple more minutes, and so I'll just open up for questions. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I have a question. Back in 2001, I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and this was right after 9/11, and my employer started offering a CERT training program, the Community Emergency Response Team. So I didn't know if that was, I think that's just a governmental program, but do you guys draw upon those people as your volunteers, or is that kind of a separate program? Like, do you offer CERT training, or?
So it's the question was asked about CERT training and how that's compared to Red Cross training. And so CERT is Community Emergency Response Team, CERT, and they're usually run by the county emergency management agency. And so we try not to poach volunteers, right? Though they're two different sets of volunteers. The Red Cross has the disaster action team, and then the CERT team is separate. We do work together. Typically, the CERT teams will do more of depends on what their training levels are and how many folks they have, but everything from like traffic and bulk distribution, other volunteer opportunities. And we've worked very closely with community emergency response teams, but they're separate entities. Okay.
And what's the one called at the Red Cross, your entity that's like that, you said?
The preparedness training? Is that what you're asking? So yeah, so there's Be Red Cross Ready would be what you would want to look at. And it's very, I mean, it's all very basic tenets, right? It's all pretty consistent, but the organizations would typically be doing different things. There have been times during an apartment fire, we called the CERT team to help escort family members from the lobby to their apartments to get some of their things if they weren't affected. So that was one thing that they could do. So it was a nice way to use a county resource to augment some of the services that we were provided. I downloaded the blood donor app, and I would encourage you all to do the same. And every time you donate, it will tell you what your hemoglobin level was. It'll tell you what your blood pressure level was. It'll give you kind of a history of those. And so I've been able to look through those and give a good sense. And it tells you where your blood went to. So I would encourage you all to donate that app. I really appreciate your time and your questions. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to contact me. I will share my contact information. It's cory.paul@redcross.org. I so much appreciate everything that you all do on a daily basis, and check your smoke alarms. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cory. Great program, and we're so happy to have you as part of our club. We are adjourned. Thank you for coming today. Happy Rotary Day.